Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of American history's most bizarre and, honestly, kinda hilarious conflicts. Forget the Civil War or the Revolution for a second. Let's talk about the time two states almost went to war over a single city. This is the story of the Toledo War, Michigan versus Ohio. So, picture this. It's the early 1800s. The United States is still figuring itself out, drawing lines on maps like a kid with a new set of crayons. The problem was, some of those lines were, well, wobbly. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 set the boundary for the future states north of the Ohio River. It was supposed to be a straight line running east from the southern tip of Lake Michigan. Simple, right? Wrong. The maps they were using were totally inaccurate. They thought Lake Michigan was much further south than it actually is. This little cartographical hoopsie created a sliver of land, about 468 square miles, that became known as the Toledo Strip. Why was this tiny strip so important? Two words: Lake Erie. The strip contained the mouth of the Maumee River, which was the perfect spot for a port. Whoever controlled that port would control a huge chunk of shipping and trade on the Great Lakes. And at the heart of it all was a burgeoning little town called Toledo. Ohio became a state in 1803. When they drew up their constitution, they were a bit sneaky. Aware of the mapping errors, they adjusted the border in their own founding documents to make sure they got the Maumee River as mouth. They basically said, yeah, we know what the federal map says, but we're just going to nudge this line up a bit. Hope no one minds. For a while, nobody really did. The area was sparsely populated, and Michigan was still just a territory. But then, things started to heat up. By the 1830s, Michigan was booming. It had enough people to apply for statehood, and it was ready to join the Union. When they drafted their constitution, they drew their southern border exactly where the Northwest Ordinance said it should be, which, of course, put Toledo firmly inside Michigan. So now you have a classic standoff. Ohio says, Toledo is ours, it's in our constitution. And Michigan fires back, nah, federal law is on our side, it's ours. This wasn't just about pride, it was about economics. Canals were the superhighways of the 19th century, and a major one, the Miami and Erie Canal, was planned to connect the Ohio River to Lake Erie, terminating right in, you guessed it, Toledo. This port was a golden ticket, and neither side was willing to give it up. Enter Michigan's governor at the time, Stephen T. Mason. He was young, ambitious, and fiery. People called him the boy governor because he was only 24 years old. Mason was not about to let Ohio push his territory around. He declared that any Ohio officials trying to exercise authority in the Toledo Strip would be arrested. He got the Michigan legislature to pass the Pains and Penalties Act, which made it a criminal offense for anyone from Ohio to try and govern in the Strip. Ohio's governor, Robert Lucas, was no pushover either. He was older, a seasoned politician, and just as stubborn. He responded by establishing a whole new county, named Lucas County after himself, right in the disputed territory. He appointed officials and called for the county court to hold its first session in Toledo. It was a direct challenge to Michigan's authority. This is where things escalate from a political squabble to a full-blown military standoff. Governor Mason rallied about 1,000 men from the Michigan militia and marched them down to Toledo to enforce the Pains and Penalties Act. Their mission: stop Ohio from holding court and arrest any Ohio officials they could find. Meanwhile, Governor Lucas wasn't sitting idly by. He assembled his own force, about 600 Ohio militiamen, and they marched north toward the Maumee River, camping just south of Toledo. So you have two state militias, armed and ready, staring each other down across a river. Newspapers across the country were having a field day, calling it the Toledo War. Now, war might be a strong word. The only battle, if you can even call it that, was more of a comical scuffle. An Ohio survey party was trying to redraw the border line when a group from the Michigan militia ambushed them. There was some shouting, some posturing, and a few warning shots were fired into the air. The Ohio surveyors, being surveyors and not soldiers, wisely decided to run for it. The only casualty was a report of a horse getting nicked. This heroic encounter became known as the Battle of Phillips Corners. No humans were harmed, but Ohio's pride was definitely a little bruised. The most dramatic moment came when Ohio tried to hold its symbolic court session. To avoid the 1,000-strong Michigan militia waiting for them in Toledo, The Ohio judges and officials snuck into the village in the middle of the night. They found a local tavern, woke up the clerk, and held court at 3 a.m. They scribbled down some official minutes, declared the court session a success, and then beat a hasty retreat back to Ohio before the sun came up, reportedly celebrating with a few drinks along the way. Mission accomplished, sort of. At this point, President Andrew Jackson had to step in. He was getting tired of these two states acting like toddlers fighting over a toy. He sent representatives to try and calm everyone down, but both governors were digging in their heels. The situation was a constitutional mess. Who had the final say? The original federal ordinance or a state's constitution? The stalemate was finally broken by a classic Washington, D.C. move, a political deal. Michigan was desperate to become a state. Congress, which was heavily influenced by the more powerful and politically connected Ohio delegation, saw an opportunity. They offered Michigan a deal. The deal was this: Michigan could become a state, but it had to give up the Toledo Strip to Ohio. Now, you can imagine how Governor Mason and the people of Michigan felt about that. They had fought for this land. But Congress sweetened the pot. In exchange for Toledo, Michigan would get the entire western three-quarters of the Upper Peninsula. At the time, Michiganders were furious. They thought they were being cheated. They called the Upper Peninsula a sterile region on the shores of Lake Superior, destined by soil and climate to remain forever a wilderness. They felt like they were trading a future metropolis for a frozen wasteland full of nothing but trees and rocks. They initially rejected the deal in a convention they called the Frostbitten Convention. But reality eventually set in. Michigan was broke from funding its militia, and without statehood, it couldn't get federal funds. A second, more, let's say, pragmatic convention was held. They grudgingly accepted the terms. On January 26, 1837, Michigan officially became the 26th state in the Union, and Ohio officially got Toledo. And here's the beautiful irony of the whole story. That worthless Upper Peninsula they were forced to take? A few years later, massive deposits of copper and iron ore were discovered there. It sparked a mining boom that made Michigan incredibly wealthy for decades, far more valuable than the Toledo Strip probably ever would have been. Michigan, in the end, lost the battle but accidentally won the economic war. So, the Toledo War ended without any real bloodshed, becoming a fascinating footnote in American history. It's a story about bad maps, stubborn politicians, and a political compromise that ended up having a surprise twist. And while the rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State football fans is still very real, it's safe to say it's a lot less likely to involve state militias these days. It just goes to show that sometimes, the strangest conflicts can have the most unexpected and fortunate outcomes. What do you think? Did Michigan get the better end of the deal? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into a weird piece of history, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one.